You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. Leaffall, a dry rustle underfoot, was the forest's only conversation until I halted, my exhalations ghosting in the sharp autumn air. A stillness too profound, too expectant, had settled over the woods. Then, movement flickered, a fleeting shape swallowed by the trees. Solitude shattered. My pilgrimage into nature's embrace was twisting into something starkly primal. A struggle to simply endure. My name is Silas. The city's clamor always fades out here, replaced by the whisper of wind through pines. A siren song I've answered since boyhood rambles near the looming peaks. Now, with 28 years behind me, the escape is ritual, a necessary shedding of urban skin for the solace of untrodden miles. This particular passage was meant for renewal. Just myself, the weight of my pack, and the vast, vibrant wilderness. Hours dissolved into the amber light of afternoon, the solitude a balm, the fall foliage a riotous tapestry. Yet peace frayed at the edges as the day waned. An unease, initially faint, began to coil within me. Insignificant disturbances, a twig's sharp retort nearby, leaves skittering unnaturally across the path, snagged my attention, setting my nerves humming. Dismissing it as mere woodland fauna felt increasingly like self-deception. A deeper intuition whispered caution. Rounding a granite shoulder of the trail, the scene stopped my breath and chilled the marrow in my bones. There, scarring a small clearing, stood a crude encampment. This was no hiker's haven. Tarpaulins, stained and sagging like bruised skin, formed a haphazard labyrinth between trunks. The ground was a midden of rust-colored cans and glinting glass shards, and gouged deep into the ancient bark of a sentinel oak, two words screamed silently in jagged, furious letters. "Keep out!" My heart hammered against my ribs. Escape was the only imperative. I pivoted to retreat, but the sound froze me. Rough, masculine voices, drawing rapidly closer. Panic surged, a cold tide. I dove behind a moss-furred boulder, shrinking myself against the stone. Through a fissure, I watched three figures emerge into the violated space. They were hard-bitten men, faces nested in wild tangles of beard, tattered layers clinging to lean frames. Each cradled a rifle with unnerving familiarity. "Told you I heard summit," one rasped, his gaze sweeping the trees with predatory intensity. "Likely some city hiker. Think they own the damn woods." "Well," another chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth that traced ice down my spine. "Picked a poor day for a stroll, didn't they?" I held my breath, each pulse echoing thunderously in my ears, terrified the slightest tremor would betray me. They prowled the clearing, their search pattern tightening, inching nearer my refuge. Staying hidden was a dwindling option. Discovery felt inevitable. Seizing a fleeting moment when their backs were momentarily angled away, I erupted from stillness. I sprinted, launching myself into the dense undergrowth, branches whipping my face like stinging nettles. Behind me, sharp cries of alarm, then the chilling clack-clack of rifle mechanisms engaging. "There! Get him!" Fear lent velocity I didn't know I possessed. I flew over decaying logs, ducked beneath grasping limbs, the recently tranquil forest transformed into a perilous gauntlet. A gunshot cracked the air, the report deafening. Wood exploded from a tree trunk mere inches from my head, bark fragments stinging my cheek. No slowing, no looking back, only flight. Their pursuit was relentless, a heavy crashing through the brush behind me. They knew this terrain intimately. My lead felt terrifyingly fragile. A plan, any plan, was needed. Ahead, the earth fell away sharply, a ravine. Without conscious thought, I launched myself down the steep embankment, a cascade of loose rock and soil tumbling with me. At the bottom, nestled beneath an overhang of rock, was a shallow cave, a dark fissure in the earth. It wasn't much, but it was sanctuary. I wedged myself into the cramped, damp space, pressing back into the cold stone. Moments later, heavy boots scrabbled on the ravine's lip above. "Where'd he vanish?" one snarled, frustration roughening his voice. "Down here someplace. Can't outrun us that fast," another replied confidently. Breath held captive in my chest. I listened as they scrambled down the slope. Pebbles and dirt rained down, a few skittering into my hiding spot. "Don't look closely. Please don't look closely." For an eternity compressed into minutes, they thrashed nearby, kicking at bushes, peering into shadows. My muscles screamed from the tension, coiled tight, ready for a final, desperate confrontation. Then, mercifully, a voice called out, "Nah, he ain't here. Musta kept going downstream. Come on." Their footsteps receded, fading into the forest's murmur. Still, I didn't move. I remained entombed in that tight, dark embrace until my limbs throbbed with protest and the light filtering through the canopy began to fail. Only then did I dare to unfold myself. Legs trembling, I climbed cautiously from the ravine. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent jolts of adrenaline through me, but the woods held only their usual twilight sounds. Returning to the trailhead in the encroaching darkness was unthinkable. Those men were still out there, perhaps watching, waiting. My only course was to push onward through the night, putting as much distance as possible between myself and their menacing camp. As blackness fully descended, the forest became an alien landscape. Shadows writhed, morphing familiar shapes into lurking threats. An owl's sudden hoot nearly stopped my heart. Yet, I pressed on. I walked until exhaustion gnawed at me, navigating by the cold indifference of the stars. When the first tentative fingers of dawn finally touched the eastern sky, I was depleted, parched, and utterly disoriented, but alive. The rising sun granted permission to pause. Slumping against the rough bark of a pine, I surveyed my state. Water nearly gone. No food, location unknown. But distance lay between me and the camp. That was paramount. Just as I began to contemplate my next desperate move, a sound reached me, faint at first, then growing stronger. The distant rhythmic whirring of helicopter blades. Search and rescue. My failure to return must have triggered an alert. Scrambling towards the nearest patch of open sky, I waved my arms with frantic energy as the machine materialized overhead. When it banked, clearly having spotted me, and began its descent, a wave of relief washed over me, so potent it nearly buckled my knees. The debriefing with park rangers and local deputies felt surreal. I recounted the squalid camp, the armed men, the terrifying chase. They listened, their faces grim, confirming they'd been aware of aggressive squatters plaguing remote trails. "You were fortunate, son," one of the rangers stated flatly. "Not everyone who crosses paths with that crew walks away." Driving away from the trailhead later, the familiar forest landscape viewed through the car window seemed altered. In the space of a single day and night, my sanctuary had revealed its teeth. Peace had given way to terror, adventure, to a raw fight for existence. I had confronted mortal danger and somehow emerged. My love for the wilderness wasn't diminished, strangely. Instead, it was tempered with a profound new respect for its untamed power, its utter indifference. As I steered towards home, I knew unequivocally that I would return. Perhaps not to this specific, haunted trail, but back to the embrace of the wild. The ordeal, terrifying as it was, had unearthed something within me. A resilience, a resourcefulness, a courage I hadn't known I possessed. The next time I laced my boots, I would carry a sharper awareness, a heightened caution. But I would also carry a deeper connection to the fierce, unpredictable heart of nature. Sometimes, illumination is found only in the deepest shadows. As for the men, the authorities promised investigation, but the forest holds tight to its secrets. My own secret was gratitude for the narrow escape, and the hard-won wisdom I'd carry into all adventures yet to come. Pixelated luminescence bled from my monitor, the sole illumination painting skeletal shadows across the deserted landscape of desks. With a final keystroke, an email vanished into the digital ether, and a wave of weary triumph washed through me. Freedom. Home. Then, slicing through the manufactured quiet, the chime, the distinct, gut-freezing arrival of the elevator on our floor. I was meant to be the only soul remaining. My name is Alara Vance, 28 years navigating the sharp angles of marketing at Pinnacle Advertising. Tonight, like many nights, I'd wrestled deadlines into submission, polishing a critical pitch until the midnight oil burned low. Solitude in the glass tower usually wrapped around me like a comforting shroud, but the elevator's announcement tore it ragged. A glance at my watch confirmed the anomaly. 11:47 p.m. The rhythmic hum of the cleaner's vacuums had faded hours ago. Security patrols were punctual, predictable, and definitely not now. A question formed. "Who's there?" But died unspoken. Some primal circuit deep within screamed silence, screamed concealment. Rising with excruciating slowness, willing my chair not to betray me with a groan, the open plan office suddenly felt vast and terribly exposed. I needed cover, an angle. Soundlessly, I slipped towards the break room. Its darkened interior offered refuge, and, crucially, a direct line of sight to the elevator bank. I pressed myself into the shadows beside the doorframe, peering through the narrow gap. The brushed steel doors slid apart with a pneumatic sigh. I held my breath, anticipating a figure. Any figure. Nothing. The car gaped, brightly lit, an empty stage in the dim corridor. A frown tightened my brow. A mispressed button? But the doors remained open, expectant. As I watched, the lights within the elevator pulsed, once, twice, then extinguished utterly, leaving a flat black rectangle, a void punched into the wall. Ice feathered down my spine. This was wrong. A visceral urge screamed, "Run! Take the stairs. Escape the building's steel embrace." But that fatal human flaw, curiosity, pinned me fast. And then, from the absolute darkness of the elevator car, something emerged. A silhouette against the faint ambient light, defined by its sheer impossibility. Tall, impossibly so, its head grazing the doorframe meant for normal men. Its limbs hung wrong, arms elongated, dangling far below where knees ought to be. The shape paused, a stillness that felt like calibration. Then, with a liquid ripple that churned my stomach, its head swiveled. No features were visible, yet an illogical, bone-deep certainty struck me. It was looking directly at my hiding place. I recoiled, flattening myself against the cool wall, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm I prayed was inaudible. Closing my eyes tight, I wished for oblivion, for this to dissolve into a caffeine-fueled phantasm. When I dared to look again, the hallway was empty. Relief, sharp and fleeting, pierced the fear, immediately supplanted by a colder dread. If not there, then where? The answer whispered from the main office space. Footfalls, but not human. Too light, too swift, hinting at a velocity that defied its perceived bulk. Escape. Now. My eyes darted to the stairwell door, perhaps 30 feet distant, across a minefield of desks. A sprint might make it, but the calculating sliver of my mind, not yet drowned in terror, knew movement meant noise. It would hear. So I moved by inches, each step a deliberate, silent negotiation with the floor. Halfway there, the footfalls ceased, silence crashed down, absolute and terrifying. I froze, breath trapped in my chest, convinced even the whisper of air in my lungs would betray me. Then, a sound, a soft, slow inhalation, unnervingly close. I turned my head, a fraction of a degree at a time, agony in every stretched sinew, and saw it. It stood at the end of the desk row, barely 10 feet away. Caught in the ghostly glow of a forgotten monitor, its face, or the lack thereof, was finally visible. A smooth, featureless ovoid, like an egg sculpted from solidified night. But as I watched, paralyzed, the surface stirred, rippled like disturbed water. Eyes opened, not two, dozens, blinking independently, tiny apertures of glistening darkness. A mouth stretched, tearing across the lower half of the void, splitting impossibly wide to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Ilara!" it hissed, a voice like 1,000 desiccated whispers layered atop one another. "We have anticipated you." I bolted. Stealth became a forgotten luxury. I threw myself towards the stairwell, the sound of tearing fabric and impossibly rapid steps exploding behind me. I slammed through the door, stumbling, nearly pitching headlong down the concrete steps. 3 stairs at a time, I plunged downwards, the echo of my pursuer reverberating in the enclosed space, a monstrous counterpoint to my own ragged gasps. 27 floors, an abyss, lungs scorched, legs screamed, but fear was a merciless engine. Always, just behind, the scuttling pursuit. I burst into the lobby, a whirlwind of terror that startled the night security guard from his doze. "Police! Call them!" I shrieked, not breaking stride, aiming for the revolving glass doors. His confused shout was lost behind me. The cool night air struck like a physical blow as I hit the pavement. Only after several blocks, lungs aching, did I risk a backward glance. The street lay empty, silent beneath the sodium lamps. No sign of the thing from above. I sagged against a wall, gulp in air, my reality fractured. What was that? Had exhaustion finally frayed my sanity? Doubt, insidious and rational, began to weave its way back in. I looked up, tracing the dark spine of the Pinnacle advertising tower against the bruised velvet sky. High above, lights began to wink on, floor by floor, lobby, 2, 3, the guard, methodically checking. Then, as the illumination reached the 27th floor, my floor, the entire building plunged into blackness. Silence held for a stretched heartbeat. Then, light bloomed again, but this time, from the summit. One by one, floor lights ignited in descent. 26, 25, 24. My breath hitched. Horror, cold and absolute, rooted me to the spot. Whatever it was coming down. A car horn blared nearby, shattering the trance. I turned and ran, directionless, propelled only by the need for distance. As I fled, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Trembling fingers wrestled it free. A text message. Unknown number. "See you tomorrow, Ilara. Don't be late." The phone nearly slipped from my grasp. How? But the question was irrelevant. A sickening certainty settled in my gut. I would return. Because the impossible horror now resided in my workplace, and if I didn't go back, it might seek me out. Through the deserted streets I ran, questions swirling like phantom debris. The creature, its purpose, its chilling awareness of me. The mundane world I knew had cracked open, revealing something ancient and predatory beneath. My life irrevocably altered. Reaching my apartment building felt like breaching a final, flimsy barricade. Fumbling with keys, a new, chilling thought surfaced. If it could be there, could it be anywhere? Was any sanctuary truly inviolable? I locked the door, double-checked the deadbolt, then slid to the floor, spine pressed hard against the wood. Sleep was unthinkable. All that remained was to wait for the dawn, for the inevitable return. Because this, I knew with chilling clarity, was merely the overture. Whatever game this entity played, I was now a pawn. As the first gray tendrils of morning light probed the edges of my curtains, the feeling intensified, inescapable. I was being watched, somewhere in the shadowed spaces between the floors. It waited. And tomorrow, ready or not, I would meet it again. The house presented itself as an improbable gift, a relic offered for a pittance. Time-worn, yes, its timbers groaning underfoot, permeated by that distinct aroma of dust and dormant decades. Yet the price felt like a whispered secret, too good to scrutinize. Ilara embraced it, grateful for the haven, the affordability, a space to momentarily anchor her life. Initial days unfolded in quietude. She acclimated, unpacked cartons transforming hollow rooms into semblances of belonging. Silence reigned, benevolent, unbroken by peculiar sounds or intrusive neighbors. Just Ilara, cocooned within aged walls. Then, the first whisper arrived on paper, concealed beneath the bathroom basin, nestled against a cold pipe, as if shying from discovery. She found it while purging grime. A fragment, torn, faintly creased. The script sprawled, erratic, birthed in haste or agitation. Just 4 words: be careful. He knows. Ilara held the scrap, a chill blooming beneath the initial wave of confusion. Who was this nebulous he? What knowledge did he possess? A discarded remnant, she reasoned. Debris from a prior occupant's life. Perhaps a childish game or a bizarre jest. She crushed it, tossed it away. A deliberate act of dismissal. Odd, certainly, yet meaningless to her existence. Days drifted, the incident blurring at the edges of memory. Ilara sank deeper into the house's rhythms, finding a fragile comfort. Then, excavating the depths of a kitchen cupboard, another emerged. This one adhered to the inner door with brittle, failing tape. Another tattered square, the same chaotic hand, starker this time. He watches. A prickle traced her spine, sharper now. Again she conjured explanations. Leftover nonsense? Teenage pranks. Yet an insidious feeling took root. This felt aimed, personal. She ripped it down, discarded it, resolved to ignore the disquiet. But the sensation clung, a persistent shadow. She began to probe the house's hidden corners, inspecting crevices and alcoves, half anticipating, half dreading another find. Each opening of a drawer, each swing of a cabinet door, became a small jolt of apprehension. For a time, however, silence returned. A week dissolved. While wrestling the vacuum beneath her bed, her fingers brushed against something affixed to the underside of the frame. A knot tightened in her gut as she reached, peeling it free. Another note. Same script, same ragged paper. Whatever you do, don't look for him. Ilara sank to the floorboards, the paper trembling slightly in her hand. This transcended jest. The deliberate concealment, the placement designed for eventual discovery. It spoke of intent. It felt directed, intimately so. Yet the identity of he and the reason for his vigilance remained maddeningly obscure. A subtle shift occurred within her sanctuary. Paranoia began to thread through her thoughts. Each turn down the hallway, every glance through a window pane, carried the weight of unseen eyes. Locks were checked, rechecked, windows secured, rituals performed against an unseen threat in an empty house. She fought the rising tide of unease with logic. Leftover trash, someone's cruel amusement, but the fear gnawed, persistent and cold. Sleep became elusive. One night, drifting on the edge of consciousness, her hand brushed something solid beneath her pillow. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She retrieved another torn fragment. This one felt different, crisp, new, as if placed moments ago. He waits until you're asleep. She bolted upright, the words landing like a physical blow. Someone had been here. Recently. She would have felt it before. Her gaze swept the shadowed room, probing corners, dissecting darkness. Vulnerability washed over her, stark and chilling. The feeling of being observed intensified, as if an intruder lingered just beyond sight, patient. From that night, darkness became intolerable. A bedside lamp cast a perpetual nervous glow. Pre-sleep rituals escalated. Locks, windows, Flashlight patrols through closets and crawl spaces, desperate affirmations of solitude. But the paper whispers continued. The crescendo arrived after a draining day at work. Exhaustion pulled at her, the promise of her bed a siren call. Entering her room, she stopped cold. There, stark against the covers, placed dead center, lay another piece of paper. Not torn this time, fresh. The handwriting, though still untidy, possessed a new, deliberate boldness. Larger letters screamed, "I know what you did." Her breath hitched, motion failed her. She had done nothing, harmed no one, offered no cause for this torment. Yet the accusation lay there, irrefutable, mocking. She stood frozen, a glacial dread creeping through her veins. A twisted game, surely, designed to fracture her sanity. But by whom? Why? The urge to flee warred with a stubborn refusal to be terrorized from her own space. Resolve hardened. She acquired a small camera, aimed it squarely at her bed. A silent sentinel intended to capture the phantom scribe. 2 days yielded nothing but empty footage. Ilara moving through the frame, alone. A fragile tendril of relief began to unfurl. Perhaps the tormentor had tired, moved on. Then, 2 nights later, slipping her hand beneath her pillow, her fingers closed around paper inside the case. Tremors seized her hands as she extracted it. The familiar, messy script. 3 words. "We saw you." Sleep was impossible that night. She lay rigid, awake, the house amplifying every creak, every groan, the relentless tick-tock from the hall becoming a drumbeat of dread. Each sound scraped against raw nerves. Multiple times she rose, checking locks, peering through windows, finding only normalcy that felt profoundly wrong. Dawn fractured the darkness, bringing not relief, but resolve. Enough. She packed frantically, stuffing clothes, essentials, anything tangible into a bag. Halfway to the door, reaching beneath the bed for her shoes, her hand struck paper once more. Bile rose. She couldn't leave it unread. Short, 3 final words. "We'll be back." No hesitation remained. She dropped the note, abandoned the house, fled without a backward glance. In the car, her hand shook on the wheel, her heart a frantic prisoner in her chest. Miles dissolved behind her until the house was a shrinking memory in the rearview mirror. Who left the notes? Who was he? Who were we? What did they mean? Had unseen eyes tracked her every move, slipping into her sanctuary at will? The questions remain, unanswered, echoing in the quiet moments. Sometimes, alone, the chill returns, the phantom weight of observation, and the unspoken query lingers. Are they still watching? The antiquated rotary phone, bone-white plastic mellowed to the shade of old ivory, occupied the nightstand beside my bed. A relic from my grandfather Arthur's house, it had migrated here after his passing last month. One more piece of him I couldn't consign to oblivion. Its heavy metal dial still offered that deeply satisfying whir-click-click when spun. Purely sentimental, this artifact. Its cord lay unplugged, a severed nerve. Which made the shrill summons at 17 minutes past 3 last Tuesday morning an impossibility tearing through the dark. A harsh, mechanical bell, insistent and furious, yanked me from sleep's depths. Heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I sat bolt upright, staring. The phone, silent for decades, shrieked into the pre-dawn stillness. 2 sharp bursts, a breath of silence, then again, the cadence echoing from childhood visits, a spectral rhythm from Arthur's time. "Impossible," I breathed, fumbling for the lamp. Warm yellow light spilled across the room, banishing shadows but not the sound. It rang on. My hand, slick with sudden sweat, closed around the receiver. "Hello?" A hiss of static answered, a sound like frying bacon in an empty void. Beneath it, something else stirred, a faint, labored wheeze. Then, unmistakably, laughter. Not the sound of mirth, but a frail, papery chuckle that prickled the skin along my arms. It rasped for perhaps 5 seconds before the line clicked dead, leaving only the dial tone of silence. My hand trembled as I replaced the handset, the plastic cool against my damp skin. I traced the cord with my fingers, following it behind the nightstand. Pulling it free confirmed what I already knew. The end was frayed, broken, unconnected to anything. Sleep was a skittish creature that night, easily startled. Rationality offered flimsy shields, a residual charge in some ancient capacitor perhaps, a vivid, stress-induced hallucination. By morning's light, I'd almost woven a comforting narrative of delusion. Until the following night. This time, the clock read 3:21 a.m. when the ringing began. I lay frozen for several cycles, watching the ivory casing vibrate faintly with each metallic peal. Resistance crumbled. I snatched the receiver. "Who is this?" I demanded, voice tight. The static roared back, louder now, and the laughter. It surged, still that desiccated, wheezing sound, but multiplied. Voices, thin and dry, overlapping in a chorus of mirthless amusement that churned my stomach. It stretched, this time, 15 seconds of chilling chorus before abruptly ceasing. I slammed the handset down, fingers white-knuckled, gripping the nightstand's edge to quell the violent tremor in my hands. My t-shirt clung, damp with cold sweat. The next day became a frantic dive into the arcane world of telephony. Could stray radio frequencies animate it? Crosstalk from phantom lines? My research yielded nothing logical, no earthly explanation for a dead phone's cry. That evening, driven by a desperate need for control, I dismantled the thing. Screws yielded, casing parted, revealing dusty innards, coils, wires, the bell mechanism. No battery, no hidden power source, no conceivable way for it to function. The pieces lay scattered across my desk like anatomical specimens. "Ring now, damn you," I muttered to the inert components. At 3:24 a.m., the bell's clangor ripped me awake. The disassembled phone lay in its scattered state, yet the sound pierced the air, undiminished. The handset rested amongst the debris, its severed cord limp beside it. My voice was a ragged whisper as I lifted it. What do you want?" Static exploded, a physical force against my ear, immediately followed by that soul-chilling laughter. More voices had joined, a swelling tide of them. They felt closer now, intimate, as if spectral mouths pressed against my very ear canal, whispering their hideous amusement. The sound saturated my thoughts, cold dread icing my veins. Then, one voice detached itself from the cacophony, a wet, glottal bubbling that scraped against the bounds of human sound. I flung the handset away. It struck the wall with a crack, scarring the plaster. The laughter sliced off, instantly. Silence rushed back in. hands still shaking uncontrollably, I swept the phone's fractured pieces into a garbage bag. Downstairs, behind the apartment building, I hurled the bag into the rank depths of the dumpster. I sat in my car afterwards, engine off, watching the eastern sky pale towards dawn, too terrified to return to my rooms. The subsequent night found me in a sterile hotel room across town. A sleeping pill offered oblivion, aided by the television's drone. Until 3:27 a.m., the bedside phone, a modern bland thing, began to ring. Even before lifting the receiver, a cold certainty settled in my gut. Static first, a deafening roar. Then the laughter erupted, thunderous now. Dozens upon dozens of voices joined in a manic, howling glee. They sounded celebratory, triumphant. One voice cried out something indistinct, words lost in the gale, and the others responded with fresh, ear-splitting peals that resonated in my bones. I slammed the phone down and bolted from the room. The night clerk's eyes widened as I burst into the brightly lit lobby, wild-eyed and breathless. "Sir, is everything all right?" "My room. The phone. Who's calling it?" He tapped at his keyboard, frowning. "Sir, there are no external lines connected to the guest rooms right now. We're in the middle of a system upgrade. The phones are, well, they're just decorative at the moment." A dazed drive home followed, the rising sun painting the sky in bruised colors. Exhaustion was a physical weight. Sleep had become a forgotten country. My key trembled in the lock. Inside my apartment, I crept towards the bedroom. There, on the nightstand, solid and whole, sat the ivory rotary phone, looking precisely as it had when I first brought it from Arthur's house. I backed away slowly, pulling the bedroom door shut. A heavy oak chair found its place wedged firmly beneath the knob. Then, collapsing onto the living room couch, I dialed work, voice hollow, calling in sick. That afternoon, compelled by a dawning horror, I drove to Arthur's old house. Sold now, but the new owners, a pleasant couple tending the garden, invited me in when I explained my connection. "Funny you should mention phones," the husband remarked, wiping soil from his hands. The inspector flagged some unusual wiring. Haven't had a chance to investigate properly. He led me to Arthur's former study. The familiar wood paneling now painted a cheerful, incongruous yellow. He indicated a wall plate behind where the old desk once stood. "See these markings? Around the phone jack? They don't match any standard schematics." I knelt, tracing the faint indentations with a fingertip. Scores of tiny, intricate symbols, circles bisected by lines, jagged sigils, formed a precise, unsettling ring around the plastic outlet. "Your grandfather wasn't into occult things, was he?" the wife asked, her tone hesitant. "We found similar carvings near the phone jacks in a couple of other rooms." I shook my head, bewildered. Not that I ever knew. He was a telephone engineer, spent his whole career with the phone company. "Huh," the husband mused, scratching his head. "Strange. Well, we're ripping it all out for the renovation anyway. Thanks for stopping by, Elias." Leaving their normalcy felt like stepping from solid ground into fog. I sat in my car, the engine silent, piecing together fragments of memory. Arthur, always insisting on landlines in every room, long after mobiles reigned supreme. His obsessive checking of lines, testing connections, replacing cords with meticulous care. Him, sometimes, Late at night in his study, the heavy receiver pressed silently to his ear, listening. What had he been listening for? That night, sleep wasn't even attempted. I sat sentinel in the living room, every light blazing, eyes fixed on the barricaded bedroom door. Precisely at 3:30 a.m., the ringing began. I clamped my hands over my ears, a futile gesture. The sound bored through flesh and bone. 12 rings. Then silence, followed immediately by the laughter, no longer needing a receiver, seeping under the door, filling the apartment. It had gained a frantic edge, a terrifying crescendo. The chair wedged against the door shuddered violently as the entire room began to vibrate. A new sound layered into the madness, rapid clicks and pops, the unmistakable sound of frantic, automated dialing. The laughter reached a fever pitch. Static crackled, not just in my ears, but in the air itself, a palpable energy making my skin prickle. The lights flickered, sputtered, and died. Darkness absolute. Then, the distinct creak of the bedroom door swinging inward. The static intensified, becoming a physical pressure crushing my eardrums. Laughter swirled around me, echoing from every corner, bodiless and ravenous. Through the overwhelming noise, words finally resolved, chanted by a multitude of gleeful, demonic voices. Wrong number, wrong number, wrong number. They howled, ecstatic. My vision blurred, the pressure unbearable. Just before consciousness fractured, I saw it. The ivory phone, floating untethered in the center of the living room, its severed cord writhing like a black serpent, the dial spinning with impossible speed. I awoke in a hospital bed. Extreme exhaustion, the doctor explained gently. My neighbors had found me collapsed in the hallway. 2 days later, I returned home. The phone was gone, vanished. In its place on the nightstand lay a single sheet of paper, covered in Arthur's familiar, shaky script. They keep trying to call through. I held them back as long as I could. Your grandmother and I both did. I'm sorry, Elias. I should have destroyed the phones before I passed. They'll find someone else to dial now. Just remember, never answer a call after midnight. Never give them a connection. They only need one voice to answer. One voice to open the line. I moved out, changed my number. No landline haunts my new apartment. Sometimes in the deepest hours, phantom ringing echoes in my memory, or I catch the faintest whisper of that dry, terrible laughter on the edge of hearing. But I don't answer. I never complete the connection. That keeps me safe. But I think of all the others, all those obsolete phones gathering dust in attics and basements, silent relics waiting. All those potential listeners who might stir from sleep, hear that first insistent ring cutting through the dead of night, and reach out in the darkness. So listen, if an unplugged phone begins to ring after the witching hour, let it. Don't answer. Don't lend your voice to the other side of that line. They are dialing, always dialing, random, desperate, eternal. They only need one person. Just one to pick up. Let it ring. Precisely when the awareness first took root, I cannot say. The night draped itself thickly, a humid shroud against the skin. I recall standing quite still in the heart of the living space, directly beneath that confluence of ceiling and wall. Sleep, once again, had proven elusive. The heat and internal agitation conspired against it. A profound hush lay upon the apartment, its stark white planes swimming in the faint luminescence cast by a solitary lamp down the hall. My gaze drifted upward, eyes narrowing. A discoloration marred the plaster there, a subtle lesion nestled where vertical met horizontal. It had no business existing. These walls, canvases I myself had rendered immaculate mere months prior, were meant to be flawless. My first conjecture leaned toward the mundane, fungal bloom, perhaps, or the telltale signature of a hidden leak. Rising onto the balls of my feet, neck straining, I scanned the surface. The ceiling's texture appeared undisturbed. I extinguished the hallway lamp, seeking refuge in shadow, hoping it merely an optical deceit. Yet even bathed in near blackness, the mark persisted, a phantom bereft of any discernible origin. Relighting the lamp, I willed myself back toward the bedroom, attempting to dismiss the anomaly. But a quiet disquietude remained, a persistent thrumming beneath the ribs. This dwelling became mine a year past, an escape from a place that perpetually felt borrowed. It signified renewal. The structure, venerable yet meticulously cared for, offered a top-floor sanctuary. Lofty ceilings, expansive windows. I remember the thrill of its perceived brightness, its openness. Such liberation was craved. My previous existence unfolded within a constricted studio. This apartment promised expanse, relief. Now, supine and wakeful, I could still perceive that tenebrous mark hovering unseen in the adjoining room. A constriction seized my chest. Breath came in shallow sips as I fought to ignore its presence. Dawn arrived, and with it, another inspection. The blemish remained static, or any alteration eluded my detection. Perhaps exhaustion had skewed my perception the night before. I tried to shrug it off, yet an unsettling quality clung to it. A chair dragged beneath the corner served as my pedestal. Standing upon it, I extended a hand, tentative. Fingertips met only the cool smoothness of paint. No moisture, no textural deviation, no film of dust. Stepping back down, however, the dark shape clung stubbornly, an ocular stain upon the room and my mind. The subsequent week saw me immersed in work, a necessary distraction. As a freelance designer, my home is my studio. Ordinarily, I relish the quietude, the low thrum of the laptop, the way midday sun floods the space. But now, each time I rose to stretch, my eyes were drawn inexorably upward. The spot had grown, not drastically, but undeniably. What began as a mere fleck now resembled a coin-sized blotch, its perimeter frayed, irregular. Staring too intently induced a sense of undulation, a subtle flexing, distorting the ceiling's clean geometry. Fetching a step stool, I attempted erasure with a dampened cloth. The fabric returned pristine. The mark yielded nothing. I noted, standing perfectly still, the utter absence of any shadow-casting object. No lamp angled oddly, no stray sunbeam, nothing logically accounted for its form. Yet there it resided, darker than the surrounding plaster, yet less a color than a negation, a void. Around this juncture, sleep became a fraught territory. Night upon night culminated in waking abruptly, drenched in perspiration, heart hammering against my ribs. Occasionally, faint creaks whispered from overhead, though the old building constantly murmured its structural complaints, settling beams, gurgling pipes. Nevertheless, an atmosphere had descended, a palpable pressure thickening the very air I breathed. One afternoon, driven by unease, I undertook a more thorough exploration, seeking some rational explanation. The previous occupant, upon vacating, had abandoned several boxes in the diminutive storage closet, items I'd neglected to discard. Within, amidst brittle magazines and yellowed newsprint, lay a small, leather-bound notebook, its pages fragile with age. Mostly filled with indecipherable scrawl, it seemed destined for refuse. But tucked between two leaves, I unearthed a faded monochrome photograph. It depicted a room's corner. This room, I felt certain, despite the unfamiliar angle. The walls appeared paler, starker, and there, in the photograph's upper reaches, almost obscured by time and blur, resided a dark smudge, chillingly akin to the one now plaguing my ceiling. The image wavered, indistinct, yet the shape's presence was irrefutable. It had been there before. A cold cascade prickled across my forearms. The former tenant must have seen it too. That evening, I plunged the apartment into darkness, standing silently in the living room center, gaze fixed aloft, allowing my vision to adapt. The lesion seemed larger than ever, perhaps spanning the width of my hand. The silence intensified until my own pulse became an audible drumbeat. Then, motion. The spot appeared to ripple, not merely a discoloration but a living umbra. My breath hitched. Illusion, I told myself. Fatigue twisting perception. Yet a profound tension gripped my chest. A suffocating weight stealing the air from my lungs. I fumbled for a lamp switch. As light flooded the space, the shape resumed its stillness, inert, yet undiminished. My efforts at denial crumbled. Over the ensuing days, the shadow propagated with alarming swiftness, particularly under the cloak of night. Each morning revealed fresh encroachment, millimeters gained along the ceiling's edge, creeping inexorably toward the walls. Its boundaries writhed into subtle configurations, tendrils perhaps, or delicate filaments tracing the plaster, not quite patterned, yet possessed of a seeming deliberation, as if methodically claiming dominion over my haven. The notion of summoning assistance arose, but who does one consult about a living shadow? An electrician? A plasterer? An exorcist? The landlord remained inconveniently absent. I considered phoning Reese, a friend, but the absurdity of the explanation silenced me. I mumbled something about feeling unwell, needing company. He promised to visit the following week. Next week stretched before me like an eternity. That night, I sought refuge in the bedroom, door firmly shut. The hallway light remained illuminated, a frail ward against the encroaching dark. Yet, drifting through uneasy strata of semi-consciousness, I perceived movement, rising, heart a frantic bird against my ribs. I eased the bedroom door ajar, peering out. The corridor lay dim, silent. But hadn't the walls themselves acquired a deeper hue overnight, as if the paint had surrendered its luster, as if the shadow were somehow bleeding beyond the living room? A clammy sweat slicked my skin. My throat felt parched. I retrieved water from the kitchen, gulping it down too quickly. Action was imperative, confrontation necessary. Thus, armed with a flashlight, I marched toward the afflicted corner, directing the beam squarely upon the mark. The light illuminated only the faint stipple of plaster, nothing more. Yet standing there, a tremor began in my legs. A presence solidified. No sound, no touch, but an entity so potent it knotted my stomach. My heart hammered. A metallic taste soured my mouth, and the fine hairs on my arms lifted. This darkness possessed weight. I wasn't merely observing it, I was feeling its viscous infiltration into the room's very atmosphere. For days, I waged a futile campaign. Sheets of white paper, meticulously taped over the corner, were discovered the next morning curled and detached at the edges. The thought of repainting, of flooding the area with brilliant light, flickered and died. This transcended paint, defied illumination. It was other, something antecedent to my arrival, perhaps ancient, something intent on consuming the space I desperately clung to. My appetite evaporated. Nausea became a nightly companion. The simplest fare tasted of chalk. The apartment grew hot, suffocating. Windows were thrown wide, inviting the city's distant clamor. Traffic, sirens, a thin bulwark against solitude. But as twilight bled into evening, I knew what awaited within. Fleeing to a motel crossed my mind, yet finances were strained, and the thought of surrendering this place without resistance felt like a deeper defeat. Besides, a perverse, self-destructive curiosity anchored me. Understanding, perhaps, offered the key to cessation. One particular night, the tension crested. The shadow commanded nearly half the ceiling, its dark pseudopods tracing the room's architecture. In the dim aura of my bedside lamp, I could perceive it shifting, pulsing with a slow respiratory rhythm. My own breathing grew shallow, ragged, pulse thundering in my ears. Trembling but resolute, I stepped into the living room. My voice emerged, a ragged whisper. "What is it you want?" Silence answered, punctuated only by that relentless silent expansion. The old photograph surfaced in my memory. I returned to the storage closet, rummaging anew, seeking another fragment, some context. Shoving aside dusty periodicals, my fingers brushed against folded paper, lodged behind a loose baseboard. A receipt, decades old, detailing minor home repairs. Scrawled on the reverse, in unsteady script, "It fattens on your fear." Ice water flooded my veins. Whoever resided here prior knew they had left this oblique warning. A surge of impotent fury tightened my chest. Was this entity truly feeding upon my terror? If so, perhaps resistance was possible. Perhaps it could be starved. But exhaustion frayed my resolve. Fear had become my marrow. Holding the flashlight steady required Herculean effort. I stood facing the corner, arms crossed, tears blurring my vision. "You will not have me," I muttered, my voice fracturing. I extinguished all lights save for one small lamp near the exit. Then, forcing myself forward, I stood directly beneath the encroaching mass. My heart threatened to burst. Slow breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. My stomach roiled. I tilted my head back, compelling myself to truly see it. The mass quivered, a faint shimmering along its edges. My knees threatened to buckle. I leaned against the wall for support, the cold sweat chilling my back. Then, an act of recklessness. I raised a hand, pressing my palm flat against the wall, just beneath the shadow's lowest reach. I braced for contact, for something to seize my wrist, to pull me into its depths. Nothing. Only the familiar, chalky texture of paint. Yet a faint creak resonated, a subtle atmospheric shift, like an unseen current stirring overhead. Nausea surged, violent and sudden. I stumbled backward, hand clamped over my mouth, breath tearing through my lungs. The ceiling appeared almost entirely consumed now, the white plaster swallowed by darkness. The presence in the room thickened, heavy as invisible pitch, making each breath a struggle. Every nerve shrieked for escape, yet I remained rooted, sweat stinging my eyes. My vision swam. A choice loomed: abandon everything now, or commit to something drastic. Snatching a broom, I thrust the handle upward, jabbing at the ceiling. The tip scraped impotently against the dark expanse. The handle, slick with sweat, slipped from my grasp. I cursed, the sound swallowed by the oppressive quiet. The darkness vibrated, and for a fleeting, horrifying instant, I discerned a shape within it, an elongated silhouette, hideously contorted, vaguely human, yet utterly wrong. The breaking point arrived. I bolted, stumbling over the rug in my haste, bursting into the hallway's comparatively blinding light. I gasped, dragging air into starved lungs, heart pounding, temples throbbing. Pacing the narrow corridor, I contemplated simply walking away, leaving everything behind. But after several minutes, a grim resolve propelled me back through the doorway. I had to ascertain if it pursued me beyond the threshold. Inside, the oppressive quiet seemed marginally less absolute. The lamp by the door flickered once, then held steady. I looked up. The darkness remained immense, yet perhaps its advance had stalled? Had it retreated fractionally, or was this merely wishful thinking? I crawled into bed, leaving the bedroom door ajar, the small lamp burning. Eventually, sleep claimed me, a restless state haunted by shifting voids and suffocating silence. Morning revealed a ceiling stained more profoundly than ever. Nearly the entire upper surface succumbed to the darkness, yet something had shifted. It had halted just shy of my bedroom doorway, as if hesitating. I dragged a hand across my face, feeling the rasp of stubble, the residue of sweat. A profound weakness pervaded me, a jittery exhaustion, as though my nerves were irrevocably frayed. Catching my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I noticed something amiss. The skin beneath my eyes bore a dark, bruised appearance. Leaning closer, I imagined, or did I truly see, a faint shadow flicker across my own features, an ephemeral echo of the darkness overhead. The decision crystallized. I would vacate the apartment by dusk and not look back. A cheap motel, my car, anywhere but here. Yet as I began gathering essentials, a peculiar resistance manifested, the air near the exit acquiring a strange viscosity. I pushed through it, stepping into the corridor, pausing for one final glance backward. Through the dim light filtering from the hallway, I discerned within the ceiling's vast darkness a distorted configuration, a hollow outline that might resolve into a face, had I the courage to stare longer. I slammed the door shut, the sound echoing unnaturally, my heart lodged high in my throat. Even now, standing here, my hand gripping the cool metal of the stairwell railing, I feel it. The presence lingers behind that closed door, fused to my walls, waiting. I wipe my damp face, my reflection momentarily captured in the polished banister. For a sliver of a second, I see the shadow ripple behind my own eyes. I blink, and it vanishes, but the knowledge settles, cold and certain. This is not concluded. That darkness has sampled my fear, and I harbor no illusions that it will remain confined to a single apartment. It possesses patience and hunger, and I suspect that the next time I meet my own gaze, I might find I am no longer gazing alone. A curt exchange with the groundsman, Silas, marked my passage into the sepulchral edifice. He'd offered a gruff acknowledgement, a wave gesturing me toward the immense, shadowed maw of the front entrance. Years of neglect clung to the structure like ivy, a patient decay I was contracted to assess. Its proprietors harbored ambitions of resurrection, a venue perhaps, reborn from ruin. My mandate was simple: chart the anatomy of its decline, map the fissures, scrutinize the load-bearing bones, chronicle every symptom of structural malaise. A standard survey I'd anticipated. 5 hours, tops, then egress. Yet the threshold yielded more than anticipated entry. It presented an immediate olfactory assault: stale textiles, the pervasive breath of mildew. The air hung thick, inert. Silas offered a final, lingering glance before retreating outdoors, phone pressed to his ear. When my gaze returned inward, the colossal doors stood shut, sealing the gloom behind me. A pressure bloomed in my sternum, a tightness I consciously suppressed, thumbing my torch into life. Its beam sliced into the foyer's dust-laden twilight, probing the depths of the main artery leading inward. Floorboards groaned their ancient protest beneath my boots. Plaster wept from the walls in chalky cascades. Dust, a universal shroud, muted every surface. This place was vast, its corridors branching into unseen wings. Wings that once, I'd been told, pulsed with the rhythm of extravagant galas. Figures in opulent attire had glided here, swayed to forgotten melodies, raised crystal to lips beneath constellations of chandeliers. Now, those fixtures were skeletal remains, or absent entirely, the era's only echoes found in stray threads of desiccated fabric, the hushed diaspora of furniture, and that persistent odor of time-locked wardrobes. Progressing toward a cavernous chamber off the right corridor, my light snagged on the wall's texture. Art, perhaps, or some remnant ornamentation. Closer inspection dissolved the notion. Masks, scores of them, leering from the plaster, each sculpted with a disquieting peculiarity. Mouths warped into unnatural smiles or grimaces, eye apertures narrowed to predatory slits. Some bore traces of intricate tooling, yet all shared an unsettling quality, amplified by the grime and the encroaching shadows. An involuntary inhalation drew the stagnant air deep, knotting something low in my gut. Their arrangement felt deliberate yet chaotic, hung at disparate heights, tilted at odd angles. Several bore the scars of time: chipped paint, fractured edges. I swept the beam across their vacant stairs, jotting clinically in my log: wall-mounted masks, possible original fittings, assess salvage potential. I pressed onward, attempting to dismiss their grotesque asymmetry. I stepped into what must have been the grand ballroom. The ceiling soared into darkness, revealing timbered ribs high above. The air here tasted damp, amplifying the lonely sound of my own respiration. Then, a distinct coolness traced the nape of my neck. Not a draft. The atmosphere remained stubbornly still, almost viscous. I froze, listening intently, expecting... what? Footfalls? Whispers? Only profound silence answered. My pulse quickened its cadence, just the building's oppressive aura working its tendrils into my nerves, I reasoned. Pivoting, I swept the torchlight across the immense space. On the far side, near a shattered window pane framing the encroaching dusk, my throat constricted. Propped against an overturned chair rested one of the masks from the corridor. Its expression was a rictus of malevolent amusement. I was certain it hadn't been there moments before. My mind scrambled for a rational cause. Had I inadvertently dislodged it? Sent it skittering across the floor? Unlikely. I hadn't brushed against the walls. Swallowing against a sudden dryness, I resolved to simply document it. Mask found displaced on ballroom floor. Possible detachment from corridor display. Then, compelled by a need for order, I crossed the echoing space to retrieve it. The wood felt alien in my grasp. Cold, coarse-grained. Its rectangular eye void seemed to absorb the light. An unpleasant sensation prickled my skin. The feeling of holding a face devoid of life. Yet paradoxically, feeling observed. Averting my gaze from its carved leer, I carried it to a nearby table, depositing it with deliberate gentleness. Keep moving, I urged myself. I examined the ornate columns, noting the insidious rot creeping up their bases, captured photographic evidence, probed fissures in the plaster with the torch beam, tested the floor's resilience in multiple locations. Perhaps 30 minutes elapsed before I retraced my steps toward the foyer, seeking the water bottle I'd left near the entrance. Passing the corridor gallery of masks, a detail snagged my attention. Something amiss. A beat of disorientation, then recognition. A bare hook, stark against the grimy wall, clearly indicating a recent vacancy. My forearms tightened. Rubbing the back of my neck, I fought for composure. Perhaps it was the very mask I'd relocated from the ballroom, logically sound. Yet a persistent wrongness hummed beneath the surface of reason. After a long draught of water, I steered myself toward the left wing. Silas had mentioned a smaller salon there and storage areas. I navigated a constricting passage, the walls closing in, the musty odor intensifying. Damp patches stained the floor, the planks yielding ominously underfoot. My torch flickered, eliciting a muttered curse and a sharp tap against its casing. The salon materialized, a more intimate space, draped in fabrics once crimson, now decayed to a bruised umber. A fractured looking glass leaned wearily against the far wall. Chairs huddled like refugees in one corner, and there, arranged on a low table, coated in a fine patina of dust, were more masks. They shared the same disturbing aesthetic, jarring angles, peculiar eye slits, distorted mouths. I averted my gaze quickly, scribbling notes on the room's structural state before beating a hasty retreat. Time bled away. My phone screen glowed past 6 p.m. Silas had intended to secure the premises by 7 but I'd explained the necessity of extended hours. He'd relinquished a weighty set of keys. "Lock the main doors tight when you leave," he'd instructed. "I'll be back come morning." His departure solidified my solitude. The prospect of navigating this labyrinth after dark held little appeal, but the assessment demanded completion. By 8 p.m., true darkness had clamped down outside. The building, devoid of power, surrendered entirely to the night. My torch beam, its sole, fragile conqueror. I was charting column dimensions in a secondary ballroom, noting ceiling heights, when the chill returned, more pronounced this time. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. Simultaneously, a faint sound reached me, soft, dragging, like heavy cloth pulled across floorboards. I spun, torchlight slashing through the darkness. Nothing. Only empty space and dancing motes caught in the artificial sun of my beam. My heart hammered against my ribs. Wind through a broken pane, perhaps. A dislodged scrap of drapery shifted by my own passage. I scanned the floor, finding no obvious source. A deep unease settled in my bones. It was time to conclude for the evening. I began the trek back toward the main hall, navigating treacherous floorboards with deliberate care. My torch flickered again. Another tap. It died completely. Cursing, I slapped it repeatedly against my palm. Futile. My phone offered a backup beam, weaker, dimmer, but illumination nonetheless. I activated it. In the reduced light, my footsteps seemed amplified. Each groan of aging timber, a percussive shock to my nerves. Wiping perspiration from my brow, I pressed on. Entering the main hall, my light snagged on something near the wall. The mask, the same one, with the twisted, sneering mouth. It lay flat on the floorboards, directly in my path, facing upward. I halted, phone held rigidly before me. Hours ago, I had placed it carefully on a table in the ballroom. Now it resided here, oriented towards me. The pressure returned to my chest, sharp and insistent. My breathing grew shallow. Kneeling cautiously, I examined it. Dust coated its surface. The hollow eyes seemed fixed on my position. A wave of visceral revulsion washed over me. An inanimate object, surely, yet its presence felt deliberate, expectant. Reaching out with a trembling hand, I grasped it again. "Stay rational," I commanded myself. There must be a logical explanation. Vibration? A subtle incline in the floor? Standing, I held the mask at arm's length. My gaze flickered to the wall display. Not one, but 3 hooks now stood empty. I hadn't registered the others before. A sweep of the phone's light revealed no other masks littering the floor nearby. A new resolve formed. Return it to the wall, hang it securely, see if it remained through the night. I turned back into the corridor, the journey feeling interminable, each footfall echoing in the oppressive silence, the air itself seeming to resist my passage. Reaching the mask gallery, I located an unoccupied hook and carefully suspended the sneering effigy upon it. The instant my fingers relinquished their hold, an icy shiver coursed down my spine. The sensation of being watched intensified, palpable and suffocating. My breath hitched, palms slick with sweat. Stepping back, I held the phone's beam steady on the mask. It hung inert. After a long moment, I forced my legs into motion, heading for the exit. The foyer lay just beyond the turn. Faint luminescence from distant street lamps filtered through the grimy door panes. Relief washed through me, cool and immediate. Nearly 9 p.m. Striding toward the entrance, I retrieved my backpack from a corner, fumbling in my pocket for Silas's keys. I switched off the phone's light momentarily, testing if the ambient glow sufficed. Shapes resolved slowly, chairs draped in shadow, a hulking reception counter coated in dust. Then, a flicker of movement registered at the edge of my vision. To the right, phone light flared back on, beam stabbing into the indicated space. Nothing but a narrow hallway, plaster peeling like sunburnt skin. A tremor ran through me. Clenching my jaw, I gripped the door handle. It yielded slightly, then resisted, jammed fast. I worked the key in the lock. The mechanism felt gritty, rusted, no purchase. Cursing under my breath, I jiggled the handle again. A click, finally, but the door refused to open more than a sliver. Blocked from outside, likely by debris. Impatient, unwilling to waste more time, I relocked it. Side entrance. Silas had mentioned others. I recalled seeing a smaller door near the lavatories. I turned back into the building's depths. Navigating the darkened passages once more, I toggled the phone light, conserving its dwindling power. My own breathing seemed unnervingly loud, my steps echoing disproportionately. The musty scent intensified near a bank of what must have been cloakrooms. Decaying curtains, perhaps, or damp rot beneath the floorboards. It was the same corridor, the mask corridor. I tried to keep my gaze averted, but it drifted inexorably toward the wall display. Counting them became a morbid compulsion. 1, 2, 3, 4. I faltered, an empty hook near the end. Closer inspection confirmed my dread. The twisted mask was gone. Again. My lungs seized, sweat prickled my forehead. Standing stock still, I strained my ears against the profound silence. Vulnerability washed over me. My breathing grew ragged. "Just a building," I whispered, the words tasting like dust. "An old, empty building." I directed the light downward. Footprints marred the dust. Mine, certainly, but other impressions too. Indistinct smears, partial trails that spoke of dragging or sliding. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm. Move. Find the side door. Get out. The corridor unspooled before me. Finally, the area near the lavatories emerged from the gloom. The side door, heavy timber, less ornate, stood at the passage's end. I hurried toward it, relief surging, only to stop dead. Leaning against the wall, just beside the doorframe, was the mask, upright, as if placed there deliberately. Its empty socket seemed to track my approach. My breath came in ragged bursts, my hands felt clammy. Ignoring it with forced resolve, I reached the door, turned the handle. It opened a fraction, then stopped, stubbornly blocked from the exterior. Debris, a fallen branch, impossible to know. I threw my shoulder against it, barely a budge. A frustrated kick at its base yielded nothing. It wouldn't open wide enough. Stepping back, heart pounding a painful tattoo against my ribs, shirt clinging damply to my skin, mouth parched, I tasted the stale, dead air with every gasp. My gaze slid unwillingly back to the mask, motionless, yet its presence felt actively malevolent, a silent, sneering sentinel. My thoughts raced, frantic. Windows? Some were boarded, others shattered, but most seemed intact, framed in heavy wood. I had to check. Moving quickly now, phone battery indicator flashing a grim 15%, I found a tall window further down the hall that looked promising. The latch, rusted solid, resisted my efforts. I threw my weight against it, grunting with exertion, until it finally surrendered with a screech of tortured metal, opening a few inches. Outside, the faint glow of the city beckoned, but a heavy metal grate barred the opening. A solid blow with my palm confirmed its immovable nature, at least without tools. Panic, cold and sharp, began to crest. My face felt flushed, my breathing rapid and shallow. Phone out again. Call Silas. No signal. The thick walls, perhaps. A text message failed to send. Nearly 9:30. Stay calm. Find another way. Push the main door harder. Find something to break the window grate. Think. I spun, phone light sweeping the hallway behind me, and saw it. The mask, on the floor again, mere feet away. Face up, my legs turned to water. Nausea churned in my stomach. How? How had it moved without a sound? A primal scream built in my throat. Get away! I stumbled backward, colliding with the wall, nearly dropping the phone. Steadying myself, heart thrashing like a trapped bird, I forced myself to walk past it. Eyes fixed straight ahead. Don't touch it. Don't look. Just get out. Back in the main foyer, I assaulted the front doors again, shoulder slamming against the unyielding wood. Still only that mocking inch of give. Trapped, the word echoed in the cavernous space. My chest ached with the force of my heartbeat. My entire body vibrated with tension. Break a window. The smaller panes near the entrance, a heavy wooden chair slumped in a corner, became my weapon. Lifting it, its weight surprising, my arms trembled with adrenaline and fatigue. I swung it against the glass. A spiderweb of cracks appeared, but the pain held. My own grunt echoed as I swung again. More cracks, a few shards falling inward, revealing reinforcing wire embedded within the glass. 3, 4 more impacts yielded little more than a ragged hole, roughly the size of a football. Too small, and the frame was securely bolted. I lowered the chair, panting, sweat stinging my eyes. Arms burning, chest tight, I felt the building's silence press in. This place wasn't empty. The conviction was absolute. Phone battery, 10%. Pacing the foyer, light jittering across walls, ceiling, floor, illuminating swirling dust motes. Silas wasn't coming back tonight. Find a defensible spot, wait for dawn, try to widen the window gap. I needed leverage, something heavy to attack the wire mesh. A cursory search yielded only derelict brooms, splintered furniture fragments. The mask intruded on my thoughts. Vacant eyes, twisted mouth, deep breaths, focus, back to the window. I hefted the chair again, aiming for the weakened area, putting every ounce of strength into the blow. More glass rained down. Wires groaned, some snapping. I kicked violently at the frame's base. Metal shrieked as screws began to pull free from the plaster. The opening widened, marginally. A sound from behind. Wood scraping floorboards. Every muscle locked. I whirled, phone beam cutting through the darkness. A dark shape huddled near the reception desk. Vague, indistinct. Lowering the light, recognition hit like a physical blow. The mask, lying there. It had been tucked in the corner, surely, but now sat brazenly in the open. Cold dread trickled down my spine. My hand trembled, keeping the weak light fixed on it. Silence descended again, filled only by the frantic drumming in my ears. Logic abandoned me. Escape was the only imperative. Seizing the chair once more, I attacked the window frame with renewed ferocity. Glass fragments flew, clinking musically on the floor. Wires tore. I ignored the sharp sting as my hand glanced off a jagged edge. Breathing turned to ragged gasps. Finally, with a groan of tortured metal, the frame pulled partially away from the wall. A gap, tight but potentially passable. Outside, the sidewalk beckoned. Freedom. My chest fluttered. Turning momentarily to retrieve my backpack, the phone's beam illuminated the reception desk one last time. The mask sat upright beside it, turned toward the window, watching. A spike of pure, unadulterated fear lanced through me. No time. Backpack forgotten. I scrambled, twisted, squeezed through the narrow aperture. Broken glass snagged my jacket. Then, stumbling, scraping, I was out, collapsing onto the cool concrete of the sidewalk. Night air, fresh and real, filled my lungs, shaking violently, hands stinging. Small cuts beading blood on my forearms. I was free. Pushing myself upright, I stared back at the looming, silent facade. Through the jagged hole I'd created, I thought I could just discern the faint shape of the mask, still sitting by the desk. Or perhaps it was just a trick of the faint light and my frayed nerves. I didn't wait to confirm. I ran, pounding down the empty sidewalk, the sound of my own flight echoing in the urban quiet. Reaching my car felt like reaching sanctuary. I threw myself inside, slammed the locks, twisted the key. The engine roared to life, a comforting mechanical sound. One last glance in the rearview mirror. The building stood dark, impassive, empty, yet the feeling lingered, cold and heavy. Gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, I took several shuddering breaths, then pulled sharply away from the curb. I didn't look back again. Driving into the city lights, wiping sweat from my face, the certainty settled deep. Another hour in that place, alone with those watchful masks, and sanity would have been the final thing I abandoned. The report could wait. Distance was the only immediate necessity. The bus sighed its brakes, releasing Silas into the slanting late afternoon light. He ambled along the main street, a ribbon of worn asphalt through a town that seemed half asleep. A few figures drifted past, carrying provisions or occupied benches outside hushed storefronts, their glances barely grazing him, an ephemeral stranger. His destination, the guest house, lay at the town's frayed edge, abutting the skeletal remains of a railway line. It presented a modest facade, its seafoam green paint peeling like sunburnt skin, fronted by a porch that groaned underfoot, and screened by a door whose hinges whined a metallic complaint. Though the sun still hung in the hazy sky, an unexpected coolness coiled in the air as he approached, a subtle premonition he dismissed in his desire for simple comforts. A room, sustenance, a pause in his journey. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polish and time. Silas offered a greeting to the woman presiding over the check-in counter. Martha, she seemed, though no name was offered. She slid a brass key across the worn wood, gesturing vaguely towards the upper floor. With a murmured thanks, he wrestled his worn satchel up the constricted staircase, the treads sighing beneath his weight, until he reached his designated room at the corridor's terminus. Once inside, he wrestled with the window, its dusty panes rattling, the hinges screeching their reluctance before yielding to the outside air. Below, perhaps 30 yards distant, lay the defunct tracks. Nature was reclaiming the iron arteries, unruly weeds and tall grasses thrust up between the sleepers, rust bleeding onto the grey ballast. Decades, surely, had passed since the last locomotive thundered through. A profound stillness permeated the scene, a quietude Silas found oddly soothing. He unpacked sparsely, splashed cold water on his face from the diminutive basin, and descended again to inquire about the evening meal. Martha indicated a small dining area tucked away at the back, confirming they served uncomplicated fare. The aroma of simmering stew, rich and earthy, drifted from unseen kitchens. He thanked her and claimed a seat at one of the scarred wooden tables. While awaiting his food, the low murmur of conversation drifted from a nearby table where two elderly men sat hunched over their cups. Their talk meandered back to a time when the adjacent station pulsed with life. One lamented the absence of the train's rhythmic passage. The other merely shook his head, muttering darkly that some things like those tracks were best left undisturbed. Silas, unwilling to intrude, kept his silence, absorbing their words. Dinner arrived shortly, a hearty, warming stew that felt like a balm after the long hours on the road, and he turned his attention wholly to it. Afterwards, weariness pulling at him, he retreated upstairs early, seeking oblivion in sleep. Around the witching hour, a sound sliced through the profound quiet, dragging Silas from slumber. A phantom horn moaned across the distance. He heard it again, a protracted, sorrowful note that hung in the air for moments before dissolving. He lay suspended between waking and sleep, questioning his senses. Straining to listen, the night offered only silence until the whistle sounded once more, sharper this time, undeniably emanating from the direction of the abandoned line. Heart suddenly hammering against his ribs, he slid from the bed. He pushed the window open wider, peering into the impenetrable dark. A sudden gust stirred the tall grasses below. No train occupied the tracks, only shadow and stillness. Yet the whistle persisted, a recurring lament every few minutes, never drawing nearer, never fully receding. Finally, closing the window against the sound and the sudden chill, he perched on the edge of the mattress. A peculiar impulse tugged at him, an urge to venture out, to confront the source of the impossible sound. But inertia, or perhaps apprehension, held him fast. He waited until the haunting calls ceased, then drifted back into an uneasy doze. Morning found him questioning Martha at the front desk. Her expression was one of polite bafflement when he mentioned the train whistle. No train had run on that line since the 70s, she stated flatly, her tone leaving no room for argument. Another guest, a middle-aged man nursing coffee nearby, suggested wind sighing through the pines. Silas knew otherwise. The sound had possessed a metallic resonance, a structured sorrow the wind could not mimic. He offered a non-committal shrug, letting the matter drop. The day was spent meandering through the small town's quiet corners. A diner smelling of fried onions, a hardware store stocked with dusty relics, a tiny library clinging to a corner plot. The townsfolk were amiable enough, though a certain reserve, a wariness towards outsiders, clung to them. Twice, upon mentioning his lodgings by the tracks, acquaintances were made of the line's disuse. "You won't see any trains there anymore," they'd say, a statement that felt less like information and more like a gentle warning. That evening, he retired early once more, a cheap paperback open but unread in his lap, his gaze repeatedly straying to the clock face. Midnight arrived, pregnant with a tense expectancy, and precisely on cue, the whistle echoed, fainter than the previous night, yet utterly distinct. He sat bolt upright, waiting, his palms slick with sweat. A part of him craved the sound's return, needing proof against the creeping suspicion of his own faltering sanity. When it sighed again through the night, he was on his feet, shrugging into his jacket, slipping out of his room. Downstairs, the lobby lay submerged in shadow. He eased the front door open and stepped into the night air, cold enough to raise gooseflesh. His gaze immediately sought the tracks. A nebulous glow seemed to hover above them, a shifting luminescence tracing the path of the rails. Heart thudding a heavy rhythm against his breastbone, he moved closer. The whistle blew a final, drawn-out cry, then silence fell. What he saw resembled not a train, but disembodied lanterns, will-o'-the-wisps dancing erratically along the trackbed in the deep darkness. Behind him, the pension door creaked. One of the elders from the dining room emerged onto the porch, his silhouette stark against the dim interior light. "What are you about?" the old man rasped. Silas confessed his vigil, his search for the phantom train. The man stared towards the tracks for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "Best come inside," he advised, offering no explanation. Silas didn't press. He retreated to his room, but sleep remained elusive, his mind replaying the image of those spectral, drifting lights. In the days that followed, an insidious curiosity grew within Silas, a compulsion to explore the tracks further, especially towards the derelict station he'd heard locals mention, situated perhaps half a mile down the line. Was it safe? He inquired cautiously. "Deserted but mostly intact," came the laconic reply. And so, late the next afternoon, as the sun bled orange and violet across the horizon, he set out. He walked along the rusted rails, his boots crunching on the gravel, stepping over rotted sleepers and tenacious weeds. In the distance, the silhouette of a small, squat building emerged, one side of its roof sagging inward like a broken wing. The station. Its windows were boarded over, yet the main door hung slightly ajar, an invitation or a warning. He pushed it open. Hinges shrieked in protest. Inside, decay reigned. Broken chairs lay scattered, a table overturned, papers yellowed and brittle littered the floor. Dust lay thick as velvet, the air stagnant and cloying. Unease prickled his skin. Shadows clung possessively to the corners, swallowing the beam of his inadequate flashlight. He lingered only minutes before retreating, vowing a return visit under the full light of day. That night, close to midnight, the wind rose, rattling the window panes in his room with such violence he feared they might shatter. He sat up in bed, pulse quickening. Then came the whistle, louder, more insistent than ever before. His skin crawled. Dressing hastily, pulling on his coat, flashlight clutched in hand, he hurried downstairs through the deserted lobby and out into the tempestuous night. The wind tore at his hair, forcing him to lean into it. The air possessed a biting cold. His breath plumed white. He flicked on the flashlight, its beam cutting a shaky path towards the tracks. The same ethereal lights danced along the rails, closer now, seeming to surge towards him before fading, only to reappear moments later. The whistle sounded again, seemingly originating just down the line. He began walking towards the lights, his shoes sinking into the soft earth beside the tracks. Questions swirled in his mind, a frantic vortex of disbelief and morbid fascination, yet his feet carried him onward. He needed to see. Was it a trick, a prank orchestrated by unseen locals? But the desolate surroundings offered no hint of human presence. He was utterly alone with the wind and the lights and the sound. The whistle erupted again, a deafening blast that made him clap his hands over his ears. His flashlight beam flickered, threatening to die. The lights on the rails flared with sudden, intense brilliance, then winked out completely. He stood panting in the sudden void, waiting. The wind subsided slightly, leaving him shivering uncontrollably, the flashlight trembling in his grasp. Minutes stretched into an eternity of silence, marked only by the rasp of his own breathing and the lingering chill on his skin. Turning, he stumbled back towards the dubious sanctuary of the guest house. The following morning, Silas renewed his inquiries around town, asking directly about the lights, the midnight whistle. Some locals offered blank stares, masks of deliberate ignorance. A few curtly advised him to concern himself with his own affairs. One woman, a clerk in the general store, conceded he wasn't the first visitor to speak of such things. Travelers sometimes mentioned the nocturnal train, she admitted, but explanations remained elusive, spectral whispers themselves. Frustration warred with an intensifying curiosity. One part of him screamed to pack his bag and catch the next bus out. Another, stronger part felt irrevocably tethered to this place, compelled to remain until the mystery yielded. That evening, he resolved to keep vigil from his window, leaving the room lights extinguished for better visibility. Midnight tolled, and the whistle's mournful cry resonated through the darkness. This time, he felt it as much as heard it. The window glass vibrated with each blast. His heart hammered a frantic tattoo against his ribs. Sweat beaded on his forehead, yet a deep chill permeated his body. He watched the lights materialize again, moving with a slow, deliberate pace along the tracks, as if searching. Then the wind surged anew, stirring the thin curtains behind him. He grabbed his jacket, eyes locked on the unfolding spectacle. The lights halted mere yards from the pension building. He strained to discern a shape within their glow, a solid form, but saw only shifting luminescence. Then the whistle shrieked, a final, piercing cry, and the lights vanished. No train, no figures, just Silas, trembling in the darkness of his room. The next day brought a decision. He had to witness this from the station itself, at night. Waiting until the town had settled into deep slumber, around 11, he ventured out again, flashlight beam carving a path through the oppressive dark. He followed the rusted spine of the tracks, navigating the treacherous footing of loose gravel and uneven ground. Reaching the derelict station, he found the door now ripped entirely from its hinges, lying flat amidst the debris inside. The boards covering the windows had warped or shifted, leaving gaps through which the wind moaned, a low, keening sound. He stepped into the station's heart, the sense of unease intensifying to a near-palpable presence. Old tins clung precariously to a shelf, their labels faded beyond recognition. His flashlight beam swept across the room, catching on a cracked mirror propped against a far wall. His own reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed. The frantic thrumming in his ears nearly drowned out the wind's lament. Precisely at midnight, the whistle tore through the night, so loud, so close, it felt like a physical blow, tightening his chest. Instinct took over. Forgetting caution, forgetting everything but the need to see, he bolted outside onto the crumbling platform. The lights were approaching from the far end of the line, bearing down on the station. A powerful, irrational urge surged through him, pulling him towards the edge of the platform, closer to the advancing lights. His breath came in ragged gasps. This time, surely, he would see it. The engine, the cars, the reality behind the phantom. The lights drew nearer, impossibly bright, unwavering. He felt the old wooden ties beneath his feet begin to vibrate. A precipitous drop in temperature struck him. The air turned bitingly cold, making his eyes water. The lights grew blinding. He had to shield his face. He braced himself for the roar of an engine, the metallic shriek of wheels on rails, but heard only the deafening crescendo of the whistle. He stumbled backward, flashlight shaken violently. A vortex of dust and debris swirled around the platform edge. The station's remaining windows rattled furiously in their frames. His body locked, rigid with terror and anticipation. The light seemed poised to engulf him, to crash directly into the dilapidated structure, but they halted abruptly, just feet away. They hovered there, pulsing, flickering. He scanned frantically for substance, for steel and rivets, for wheels and couplings, but found nothing, only disembodied incandescence. Then, the whistle ceased abruptly, plunging the world into a thick, ringing silence. His ears hummed. His face felt numb. He stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, unsure whether to flee or stay. Slowly, agonizingly, the lights began to dim, fading like dying embers. He looked around. The very air felt heavy, charged with unseen energy. The pull, the urge to step closer, still resonated within him, but fear held him rooted. Eventually, the lights winked out entirely, leaving Silas alone in the profound darkness, the silence broken only by the frantic pounding of his own heart. Returning to the pension near 1 in the morning, he slipped into his room and collapsed onto the bed, heart still racing, thoughts a chaotic jumble. Fear warred with a strange, exhilarating thrill. What had he witnessed? What would happen if those lights ever truly arrived? Would something disembark? Would the spectral finally coalesce into the real? Sleep offered little respite that night. He lingered for a couple more days, caught in a limbo of hope and dread, hoping the nightly phenomenon would cease, yet simultaneously hoping for some definitive resolution. Each night, the wind seemed to howl with greater ferocity, the whistle's cry escalating in volume and intensity. On several occasions, the vibrations were so strong he expected the window panes to explode inward. Restlessness consumed him. He paced his room until the first mournful note sounded, then dashed outside to his now familiar post near the tracks. The lights continued their enigmatic dance, sometimes teasingly close, sometimes frustratingly distant, never resolving into a tangible form. On his final night, Silas sat wrapped in a blanket on the guest house porch, the air bracingly cold. As midnight drew near, the temperature plummeted. The whistle sliced through the stillness, triggering the familiar cascade of adrenaline and tension. His hands trembled. His mouth felt dry as dust. He watched the lights bloom at the far end of the line, flickering like faulty stars. He forced himself to remain seated, fighting the visceral urge to run towards the station, towards the heart of the mystery. He could see the tall grasses bowing in the wind, the dull gleam of rust on the rails, the faint ethereal glow hovering just above them. For a fleeting moment, he contemplated leaving at dawn, putting this unsettling town and its nocturnal haunting behind him. But a larger, more insistent part of him remained captivated, needing to know what might happen if that spectral train ever completed its journey, ever pulled alongside this decaying outpost. The reason for this compulsion remained obscure, a magnetic force drawing him closer each night, overriding the primal fear that clenched his chest. He still doesn't know. Will solid steel ever replace those phantom lights? Will the whistle's call remain an eternal, unanswered question? The townspeople offer no solace, their silence a wall against his seeking. As Silas sits now, replaying each unnerving detail, he feels again that phantom chill upon his skin, hears the echo of that distant horn in the chambers of his memory. It is midnight. Outside, the wind begins its nightly crescendo. The windows rattle their familiar complaint. His breath catches. Faint lights flicker into existence down the line. Spectral eyes in the darkness, moving steadily along the tracks, drawing closer with each passing second. He doesn't know what he will do when they reach the station, if they ever truly arrive. But he cannot look away, he cannot stop listening, and he cannot shake the chilling certainty that sooner or later he might witness more than just lights. He might finally hear that train pull in, right beside this old guest house. And when it does, Silas will be there, waiting, hands trembling, heart threatening to burst, mesmerized on the threshold of the inexplicable. Fear isn't my default setting. Solitude suits me. The quiet hum of my own company has always been preferable. My life unfolds in predictable rhythms, a simple cadence. Most evenings, post-work, the pull of the pavement calls. Not a marathoner's ambition, merely a circuit or two around Briarwood Park, nestled conveniently near my apartment here in Oak Haven. Familiar territory, a space I'd always equated with safety. Until a few weeks back, when the equation shifted irrevocably. It was an evening draped in cool tranquility. The sun bled low, stretching shadows into long skeletal fingers across the grass. The air held that perfect equilibrium, neither biting nor sweltering, ideal for the steady beat of feet on asphalt. My customary path unfolded, across the threshold of the main gate, over the quaint stone bridge spanning the creek, a loop embracing the glassy surface of the pond, then retracing my steps. The park breathed emptiness, a state I cherished, punctuated only by the occasional kindred spirit runner or the silhouette of someone walking a dog. Peace, as it always was. Minutes into my rhythm, he registered, a figure approaching on the path, moving counter to my direction. A stranger, peculiar given my months-long dedication to this exact route. The faces usually cycled through a familiar rotation. He was swallowed by a hoodie, the cowl drawn up despite the temperate air, paired with dark denim, attire dissonant with a casual park stroll. An oddity noted, then dismissed, as I maintained my pace. As our paths converged and then diverged, I felt it, the distinct, prickling pressure of observation. You recognize it instantly, that invisible weight. A swift, sidelong glance confirmed it. He hadn't averted his gaze. His features remained obscured beneath the fabric shroud. Yet his head was undeniably angled towards me. Disquiet settled, a cold stone in my gut, but I pressed onward, assuming his journey would simply carry him away. Yet upon completing my loop, preparing to exit, he materialized again, stationed near the very entrance I'd passed through minutes before. Logic faltered. My circuit was brief. His reappearance there felt temporally impossible, unless he doubled back, trailing unseen. I reasoned with myself, just another park visitor, but the explanation felt thin, brittle. The way he stood, utterly still, expectant, watching. I forced the unease down, finished my run, retreated home, chiding myself for nascent paranoia. Nothing. It was nothing. The next time, however, confirmed it wasn't nothing. Dusk was settling, painting the sky in bruised purples, the park even more deserted. As I commenced my run, my gaze snagged on him, near the entrance again. Not walking this time, not surveying his surroundings, just still, observing. A frantic drummer took up residence behind my ribs, but I fought to project indifference, focus on the cadence, eyes down. I ran past, refusing to look. Rounding the pond, a furtive backward glance revealed empty space where he'd stood. Relief, potent and swift, washed through me. An overactive imagination, surely. But nearing the exit once more, I saw him. Off the path's edge, partially screened by a low-hanging branch. Motionless as I approached, silent. Yet the intensity of his unseen eyes felt like a physical touch. I quickened my pace, feigning obliviousness, acutely aware of his scrutiny tracking my every step. Back in the sanctuary of my apartment, the disquiet lingered, sharp and metallic. The image imprinted itself, the hooded stillness, the face lost to shadow, that unwavering focus. Laughter felt forced, the self-reassurance hollow. Just some guy. Parks are public spaces. Yet an instinctive wrongness pulsed beneath the rationalizations. Over the ensuing week, evasion became my strategy. I shifted my timing, hoping to disrupt the pattern, to arrive when he wouldn't be there. Futile. Each time, unfailingly, he manifested. Always near the entrance, always watching. Sometimes standing sentinel at the periphery, sometimes walking slowly against my direction. But present, inevitably present, as if attuned to my schedule by some unseen mechanism. One afternoon, I resolved to break the cycle entirely. I arrived earlier, late afternoon sun still warm, and entered from the park's opposite side, near the pond itself. A different approach, a different trajectory. Surely this would confound him. The first half of the run offered blessed normalcy. No sign. Relaxation began to seep back in. Perhaps it had all been in my head, but as I neared the completion of this alternate loop, my breath hitched. There he was, further down the path this time, walking with the flow of my direction. I instinctively decelerated, hesitant to overtake him. The moment my pace slackened, he stopped, stepped aside onto the grass, resumed his silent vigil, watching. A leaden weight plummeted in my stomach. Follower or merely eccentric, the distinction blurred into irrelevance. The effect was deeply unnerving. Right then, the decision crystallized. No more evening runs. The creeping dread wasn't worth the exercise. Mornings, I told myself firmly. I'd switch to mornings. Days later, inexplicably, drawn by some stubborn refusal to be intimidated, I found myself back at Briarwood Park as evening bled into night. Why? Perhaps defiance, a need to prove the fear baseless. I compromised, sticking to the wider, better-lit paths near the entrance, a truncated route intended for safety. The initial stretch was clear. Hope flickered. Maybe tonight was different. Maybe the pattern was broken. Maybe I'd truly agitated myself over phantoms. Then, halfway through my abbreviated loop, I saw him, ahead, positioned on a smaller trail, branching off into a denser, more secluded cluster of trees. Just off the main artery, his form half merged with the deepening shadows. My stride faltered, heart hammering against my ribs. Look away, don't acknowledge him, don't feed whatever satisfaction he derived from my fear. But the knowledge was absolute. He was waiting. I forced my legs into a steady rhythm, feigning unawareness, propelling myself forward. As the distance between us shrank, just as I was about to draw level, he stepped deliberately onto the main path, turned, began walking directly towards me. My chest constricted. Turn back? Too obvious. Too much like flight. I maintained my course, striving for outward calm, feeling the burn of his unseen gaze as he closed the gap. In the instant we passed, he angled his body sharply across the path, a movement devoid of casualness, intentional, an interception. I stopped dead, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Run? Could I outpace him? He was closer to the main road, seemed to possess an unnerving familiarity with the park's layout. I resumed walking, faster now, a forced march. He matched me, step for silent step, maintaining a proximity close enough to feel like a palpable pressure at my back. A peripheral glimpse confirmed it. The hooded silhouette, face still a void, footfalls unnervingly quiet, steady. Panic flared, cold and sharp. What now? A small clearing beckoned to my right, leading onto another, less traveled trail, one rumored to loop back towards the street. Unfamiliar ground, but my only option short of direct confrontation. I veered sharply, plunging towards the darkened opening, praying he wouldn't pursue. The instant my feet left the main path, I heard it. His footsteps behind me, quickening, closing the distance, following. The ambiguity vanished. He was hunting. Raw instinct took over. I broke into a desperate sprint, legs screaming, breath tearing raggedly from my lungs. No looking back, only the frantic pounding of my own heart and the heavy, accelerating thud of his pursuit, gaining ground with terrifying speed. The narrow trail became a tunnel of grasping branches, scraping bare arms as I barreled through, panic clawing at my throat. Just as my muscles threatened to seize, a faint luminescence filtered through the trees ahead. The distant sodium glow of streetlights, the muffled hum of traffic, the road so close. I surged forward, legs trembling, lungs burning, the chilling certainty of his presence right behind me, almost upon me. Then, abruptly, as my feet hit the rough verge where the trail spilled out onto the roadside, his footsteps ceased. I didn't pause. I stumbled onto the tarmac, waving frantically at a passing car, a futile gesture swallowed by the night. They didn't stop. Whirling around, I scanned the trail's mouth, bracing for his appearance. Empty. He was gone, vanished back into the park's shadowed depths. I stood there, gulping air, the frantic pulse in my ears drowning out the night sounds, waiting, watching the tree line, half convinced he would emerge at any second. But nothing moved. The park held its breath, dark and silent, and I was utterly alone. Eventually, the adrenaline subsided enough for me to navigate the streets home. Briarwood Park remains forbidden territory. I haven't returned. I can't. The mere thought conjures the same visceral dread, the icy tendrils of fear. Who he was, what motive fueled his silent stalking, remains an unnerving mystery. But the certainty persists. He was following me. And had I not run, had I hesitated even a moment longer on that darkened trail, the outcome might have been starkly different. Now, the simple thought of jogging, once a release, tightens a knot deep in my gut. The feeling lingers, indelible, that he's still out there somewhere, waiting, watching, and that park, once my sanctuary, will forever remain a place I dare not tread.